The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Good morning and good afternoon. This is Mark Kovich. I'm a system sales specialist for IBM. I am part of the IBM Internet of Things Continuous Engineering Organization. Thank you for joining the webinar today on Configuration Management and Doors Next Generation. Today presenting is Adam Hammett of HTII. Adam has 8 years of professional experience with software support, research analysis, database management, configuration management, requirements management, architecture development, as well as engineering support. He holds a Master of Science degree in Systems Engineering from Johns Hopkins University, as well as a Bachelor of Science in Physics from St. Mary's College of Maryland. Adam is a Department of Defense certified enterprise architect and maintains several certifications from IBM. Before we get started, I'd like to mention that you are in listen mode only and that this webinar is being recorded. There will be a question and answer session at the end of Adam's presentation. I'd like to point out the question box in your control panel. Just click on the plus sign that says questions. The dialog box will open up. You can submit questions directly to me. I'll be screening all the questions and saving your questions for the Q&A session after the presentation. The questions will be read in chronological order, and as usual, I will reply to you when your question will be coming up so that you're aware that you can pay attention to the answer. Many of the questions will be asked by me directly, so if I do that, there will be no need for me to ask them directly to Adam unless I feel it has a general appeal to all the attendees on today's webinar. Also, I'd like to mention that the recordings, we've archived them on the IBM Federal site. All the older recordings are still there. However, going forward, we're going to a new system. So in the interim, what we'll do is we're going to go ahead and archive all future recordings on the GoToWebinar platform. And you can go ahead and view the recording based on the automated follow-up email that I sent to all registrants. There'll be an additional link embedded into that email you can click on, and then you can go ahead and view the recordings. And those will be up in the system for 6 months. There's a 6-month window we can actually archive them. And then in about a month or two, we're going to go to another system where you'll be able to go view recordings. So with that said, I think we're ready to start. Adam, you can go start your presentation.
All right, thank you for that introduction, Mark, and thank you all for joining us today to go over configuration management and door next generation 6.0 and beyond. So let's start with a very quick introduction. As Mark said, my name is Adam Hammett, and I primarily support engineering efforts using IBM tools such as Jazz, Doors, and other rational products. I also recently became the co-lead of the Doors Virtual Rational User Group. This is an exciting group that I'm co-leading with Paul Lusardi, and we're looking to grow this group, so please take a chance to check it out. Our next webinar will be September 20th, where we will have senior IBM representatives talking about the product roadmap for Doors and Doors next generation. I also want to take a second to introduce the company I work for. I work for HTII. The company has traditionally supported Doors for over 20 years, with over 5 years of support now for Jazz. We hold a variety of IBM certifications, and our goal is to help customers make the most of their rational tools that they're investing in.
Adam, I'd like to make a mention to the attendees also that if they like this presentation that you're utilizing today, you can download it immediately in the handout section of your control panel. Just click on the plus sign and you can click on the button there that has the presentation if you desire to get a copy of it right now. Otherwise, feel free to reply to my automated email. I'll be happy to send you the presentation. Thank you, Adam.
Excellent. Thank you. So the goals for today's presentation, we're going to first introduce configuration management in Doors next generation. Of course, this is a long-awaited feature that everybody's excited about. We're going to go over the key terms and a couple use cases to try and understand what we can now do with configuration management. Doors next generation itself, I'm sure as most people have probably used or have seen, it's a user-friendly tool. So it's not difficult to use. What we're trying to cover today is how to best use it and what's available to use within the tool. We're going to pick a specific use case, and we're going to travel all the way through it using DNG configuration management. And lastly, I'll just cover a couple helpful hints and best practices so everybody gets off on the right start. This presentation is all slides and no videos. I'm choosing to do that on purpose. Videos in the past are hard for people to download, so I'm trying to include a lot of pictures, so this is something that folks can go back to when they're trying this on their own with Doors Next Generation and reference for further help. A couple important abbreviations today. Of course, Doors Next Generation will be referred to as DNG. And we'll talk a little bit about global configuration, which you'll see abbreviated throughout JAS material as GC. Okay, so first let's get started by going over some key terms that are new to Doors Next Generation. We're going to go over these in more detail in the next slides, but let's just look at the 4 main terms we're going to be learning about. The first term is context, which is just a way of describing how you're currently looking at the requirements in Doors Next Generation. There's baseline, which should be a familiar term for folks who've used traditional doors in the past. It's a snapshot in time, very similar to what you would use a baseline for in Doors 9.5 or 9.6. Next, we're going to talk about streams, which is the ongoing live configuration. It's the as-is state. And lastly, we'll discuss change sets, which you can think of as a branch from the stream and a way to propose changes. So first, let's talk about context. Context displays in Doors Next Generation 6.0 and above now in the top right, circled in red. This display will always show what context you're currently in, whether that be a change set, a stream, or perhaps a baseline. You can alter the context you're viewing the requirements in by selecting the drop-down in the context menu, at which point a pop-up dialog will appear and you can select whatever context you'd like to view. For folks who are familiar with JAS, please remember that you will have to type in a star if you'd like to see all, and that will populate this list with all current contexts. This drop-down here can be used to select baselines, change sets, or streams, whatever you'd like to view. An important note about context and configuration management in general in Doors Next Generation is that when you switch context, it switches essentially how you're viewing the entire database. For example, if I switch the context to a change set, everything will change based on what that change set is. So all my artifacts will change, my modules will change to the current state that that context has directed it to. Now let's go over baselines. As I said earlier, baselines are pretty similar to the way they were in traditional doors. It stores a configuration in a moment of time, like a snapshot, if you will. A baseline can be reverted back to. It would be possible to do that if you wanted to create a stream, and we'll go over that in a little bit, from a baseline. That's a way to revert back to a baseline. A baseline can be opened, so perhaps you may want to check an old version of your document or requirements. You can open that baseline, and you can see that old version as you wish. Baselines are useful because you can also compare against them. Let's say you have stored a baseline, and later on, when you're working through a change set, you'd like to see what the differences are. Well, a baseline is a useful tool in that case because you can compare against it, and Doors Next Generation will show you red line changes real time in the tool. So as we've discussed, baselines are commonly used for storing the baseline version, obviously. So for example, every new minor or major version would usually be accompanied by a baseline in Doors Next Generation. And it's also useful for ensuring you have a restore point. If there's a particular configuration that you might ever need to go back to, a baseline is a good choice to store that. Next, let's go over the stream. The stream is a major concept in Doors Next Generation and one of the most important building blocks. By default, when you use configuration management in Doors Next Generation, you're going to be it's going to create a main stream, and you're going to be working in the stream in the beginning. The stream may seem intimidating or complex, but the easiest way to think about it is that it's just the current configuration that your requirements are in. So for example, for an older version of door section generation, like let's say door section generation 502, where we didn't have configuration management, a stream still exists, if you will, because it's just the current configuration that your requirements are in. The term stream is just useful to use because now we can create different configurations using different streams, and we can also refer to it with a term, making it easier to understand. So overall, a stream is an ongoing live configuration. It's the as-is state. Streams can be created from another stream. So for example, you could nest streams together, perhaps if you have multiple development environments, or perhaps you have multiple development efforts going on simultaneously in parallel. You may need to use multiple streams. And also, you can create streams from baselines, as we covered earlier, in case you want to revert back to a particular configuration that you saved in a baseline. Lastly, streams can be delivered to other streams that may exist. And this is very powerful because perhaps you may be working in a parallel effort environment where eventually those parallel efforts need to merge together into one. In this way, you can deliver the changes in one stream to the other, merging the streams together. So in summary for streams, they're very useful for storing the as-is configuration. By default, they do that. If you have parallel efforts, they're very useful for separating out the parallel efforts so that they can occur simultaneously. And it's also useful if you have efforts that you know are going to merge together in the future. Now lastly, let's go over change sets before we go over a few use cases. A change set is the proposed to be state. What's really cool about change sets is instead of proposing changes, you actually get to work in the door section generation environment, which we'll go over, live with the requirements. So when you create a change set, you can think of it as almost creating a mirror of the current configuration that allows the users to edit the requirements in this mirror without affecting the stream or the configuration managed environment. This is really powerful because instead of having to request changes for every little perhaps requirement or even to the word level, now we can just give users a change set and they can work in that environment very quickly to propose their changes. So change sets can be created from any stream. They can be compared to the stream at any time, which is a powerful feature. Let's take, for example, if you've been working in a change set for a few months, you're just not exactly sure anymore what's changed or what's not, or perhaps what a different user has changed. You can use a built-in feature in door section generation, which we'll go over, to compare the change set to the stream to see in red line exactly what's changed. Change sets can then be reviewed at a later point whenever the team feels it's appropriate to do so, to accept or reject the changes. Changes from the change set are then flowed into the stream once they are accepted, allowing for an easy way to update the requirements. What's important to note about the change sets is that if the stream changes in any way, those changes will flow to the change set that has been developed from the stream. So, for example, if we have our main stream that we're working in, and we've created a change set from this main stream, if that main stream has a requirement change, that requirement change will be reflected in the change set. Now that's very powerful because instead of having to create a whole new change set because something's changed, that accepted change is already flown directly to the change set that the team is working in. So for change sets, they are very useful for proposing changes, enforcing a formal review process so that nobody is directly editing the current configuration or the stream, and it's very useful for teams or individuals to propose their changes or to work together in a particular environment that they may later apply to the stream. So now that we've gone over some key terms, let's go over some use cases to try and better understand what this configuration management allows us to do. So here's a simple use case. Here we have the symbol for a stream, and we can see that all we have is one main stream in our project. Now all we've done is at the very beginning, we've created an initial baseline, which could be our version 0. Here we can assume that the team is working directly in the mainstream, applying changes directly to the mainstream as they would in DORSX Generation 502 or previous versions. And now we have the ability to baseline a version 1 at a later point in time. So in this simple use case, all we're using are streams and baselines to store points in time. Now let's look at a little bit more of a complex use case, a parallel effort use case. So let's say we have a main effort. Let's say we're developing a system, and the system has a main component, which can be represented by the mainstream, and the system also has a secondary subsystem component that can be represented by the second effort. Now both of these efforts depend on the requirements, so they can't be completely separate, but they are uniquely different efforts. So what we've done here is from the mainstream, we have, and this is another term that we're going to use today, is branch. We've branched out a second stream for this second effort. In this way, we can have two different teams working simultaneously in parallel on their own individual requirements, at which point at a later date and time we can merge these together when we're ready to release the requirements as a whole. So this would be an example of using configuration management to support parallel efforts within a project. Now let's look at a formal configuration management use case. This would be very useful if we have a configuration management process in place and we need to enforce it so that no changes are made to the stream without prior approval. So to do so, we're going to use change sets, represented of course by this delta icon. So we're starting with the mainstream, which is where our requirements will, our current configuration managed requirements will exist. We create a change set from the mainstream, which as we discussed earlier, you could think of as almost a mirror or a duplicate, if you will, of the mainstream for the group to propose their changes in. This could also be used for just one individual, or can support a whole entire team proposing changes to a change set. So now the team or individual can propose his or her changes directly in this change set, at which case at a later point in time the change set will be reviewed by whatever process is in place. Perhaps it's the chief engineer that will be reviewing the proposed changes, and the changes will either be accepted and delivered, or they may be rejected and not delivered. But let's assume they're accepted and delivered. They will then automatically flow into the mainstream, applying those changes to the current configuration that's in the mainstream. And you can, this is just one small example, but you can think of this as an ongoing process. This could be something to perhaps support agile requirement development, where you have many rounds of changes to the requirements needed before you roll out the requirements document. Now let's look at a combined use case where we're using streams, baselines, and change sets. So in this example, we're again starting with the mainstream. We're going to first create an initial baseline so that we know where we started. We know the initial configuration. We then create a change set so that we can enforce formal configuration management. Changes will be proposed, reviewed, accepted, and delivered in our formal management process, which we're using change sets to support. Once these changes are delivered back to the stream, we can then baseline again, and we now have a version 1 of our document. At this point, we could choose to start the whole cycle over, or perhaps we need to turn more into a parallel effort, which this process could support as well later down the line. Now lastly, let's look at an advanced use case. So for advanced projects that may have parallel efforts where they need to enforce change management, this is what the process diagram may look like. So we start with our main stream, and I'm sure everyone's seeing a consistency now where we're always starting with the main stream and going from there. We first create a baseline, which may be our baseline V0. We branch from this stream into a second stream because we have a second effort, perhaps a subsystem that has unique requirements. And in each of our streams, we have a formal change management process. And we have enforced this by using change sets. So in the main stream, dealing with our main system, we may be using change sets to enforce changes to the main components of our main system. In our second effort, we also have a formal management process, configuration management process, used to enforce changes to our secondary or subsystem. Lastly, we can merge at a later point in time when we're ready to produce a document our requirements from our second effort into our main stream to create our system level requirements document. At that point, we can then baseline as we now have a point where we can go back in time if we ever need to, or if we ever need to compare to our version 1 of the document, baselines provide that easy solution to do so. So now let's just walk through a standard use case, and we're going to walk through this in detail from start to finish. So to use the standard use case, we're first going to need to enable configuration management. We're going to create a baseline so that we know where we're starting from. We're going to create a change set. We're also going to demo how to compare changes. And lastly, we will deliver changes to the stream. So enabling configuration management. I won't read through this whole thing, but this is the screen where you will enable configuration management. For folks who are familiar with Jazz, this is under Settings and Manage Project Area. You'll notice that it's in your menu item where you would traditionally manage permissions or roles and so on. There's a configuration management option now in version 6.0 and beyond. It goes into great detail to explain what enabling configuration management does. Some of the key takeaways are, once you enable configuration management for a project, there is no going back. You cannot undo it. So this should be taken into consideration, of course, before enabling configuration management in any project. Another major consideration is that in a configuration-enabled project within Jazz, or DOORS Generation, cannot link to other projects that are not also configuration management enabled. So what this means is, let's say you have a DOORS Generation project that is not using configuration management, and you're linking to an existing DOORS Generation project that so far has not used configuration management either. Well, if you enable configuration management in one of those projects, you will need to enable it in both of the projects in order to link between those projects like you were prior. So it's a very important consideration to take into account. Now, you'll notice how this button is grayed out. If you were to go to this in a fresh Jazz install, it will always be grayed out for you, and we'll go over why that is so in the next slide. So the button is grayed out on purpose because it requires a key in order to enable configuration management. Now this key is completely free and it's very easy to get, and the reason for having to get the key is just so you fully understand all the implications of enabling configuration management. So for further considerations, there's a great write-up by IBM that goes into great detail everything that configuration management means for your project. I highly recommend that folks read this before enabling. For getting a key, you can follow this link here, and it's quite an easy process. Essentially, you read through some material, you say that I understand, and the key is immediately generated. You don't have to wait at all. It will automatically be generated in your web browser. Now, once you receive this key from IBM, what you do with that is you go into your application administration, and for folks who may not be their application administrator, you would at this point ask your server administrator to do this for you. Within application administration, under advanced properties, there is a local versioning component. In this local versioning component is where you will enter the key value, at which point once you save, if we back up a slide, this grayed out button will no longer be grayed out and you'll be able to select it. Now for folks who are using the entire JAX platform, this is an important step to remember because it's required if you want to enable configuration management in any of the applications, including Rational Team Concert or Quality Manager. Let's go over permissions very quickly before we get into our use case, because it's important to understand that with configuration, with all these additional features, we also have additional permissions to consider. So here in the right, we'll see some new permissions available to us because of configuration management. We could decide who in the team or which roles on the team manage baselines, manage change sets, and streams. What's important to note here is that these permissions are for modifying the actual components. So for example, modifying the baseline component, the change set component, or the streams. For requirements as a whole, the traditional permissions are always the same. So whether the requirement is in a change set or a stream, the permissions will apply to the user regardless. What is important to note here, though, is that, as we have in our second bullet, users will need edit permissions still in order to propose changes within a change set. So now that we have enabled configuration management, what you'll see is that in your context, you'll now have an initial stream. And by default, it will be the name of your project, an initial stream afterwards. And that will be developed for you as your main stream. If we select our drop-down context button as we want to create a change set, we'll notice we have some additional features now on our right-hand side now that configuration management has been enabled. For example, we now have this Create Change Set button, and we can also accept, deliver changes, and even compare configurations. So let's now select this Create Change Set button to create our first change set. Once we create our first change set, a prompt will come up just to name it, and we can enter any name we want. The name I chose was Demo, so what we have total is Demo Change Set. Once we create our change set, it automatically switches our context. Remember, our context is shown in this upper right dialog. It automatically switches our context to this new change set. We are technically in our change set, and we are free to make changes as we wish without affecting the stream. So for example, if I'm an engineer and I would now like to propose or to enter a change into this change set, all I would do is treat this as any other context I may be in and go to either artifacts or perhaps I'm working in modules and just make the change I would like to make. That change is automatically stored within the change set, but it is not yet applied to the stream as we're configuration managed, so that at a later point in time it can be reviewed and either accept it or reject it. So let's say I've made quite a few changes and I want to see all the changes I've made. In this example, I've actually only made one change for ease of use, or for ease of learning, but let's go through that now. So to see the changes I've made, when I'm in my change set, I hit the context drop-down button again, and I say compare with stream. Remember, the stream is our configuration managed version, or some would refer to that to as our truth data. So let's go back to that now and compare our change set to our stream. So when we select compare with stream, a new window will open, and we'll see here all the changes that have been made in the change set that differ from the changes in the stream, or excuse me, that differ from the stream. So, for example, in this particular case, I've added this text, literally, over here. This is the change set. In the initial stream, we didn't have that text. Furthermore, we can see that in the initial stream, we had test, 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 whereas in the second change set, that text has been deleted. Now, if you had many changes, perhaps 50 or more, you would see them all numbered here, and you could step through them one by one for ease of use. Now, let's say that we've compared the changes we've made, and we now would like to deliver them to the stream. So what we're really referring to is that we have proposed changes in our change set, and we now would like to apply them to our configuration managed version, which is the stream. So to do this, we select the context button drop down. We select deliver change set. At that point, a prompt will come up, and it will first prompt you and ask, would you like to review the changes, or would you like to automatically deliver the changes? For us, we'd like to review the changes one by one so we can see exactly what's changed, and that way we can be sure that the changes that are going into the stream are the ones we'd like to make. There is the option here, perhaps, that you would like to just automatically deliver the changes and you have no need to review them. For that option, you would select this second checkbox. So now that we've selected review the changes to deliver, next a prompt will open and it will show us exactly what changed. So as we saw earlier, we've only made one change. We deleted test, 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 and we added this text. And that's the change that's been made. And you can see that we do have strike through and red line features, making it very easy to view the change. What's important to note here is that there's also a open artifact option. This is very useful. Perhaps you'd like to see the attributes related to this particular requirement, or perhaps this isn't exactly the change you wanted and you want to go quickly to this particular requirement or artifact to modify it further. To do so, you can simply select Open Artifact, at which point the artifact will open and you can either view any attributes you wish or make further changes as desired. So lastly, once we hit Next and Finish, the changes will be applied directly to our stream, and we have then delivered a change set modifying our stream directly. So that was just a simple use case walkthrough of how we could use change sets for configuration management. We also need to go over some advanced configurations to see what else is available with this new feature in door section generation. So to get to advanced configurations for configuration management door section generation, you'll select your settings icon as if you're going to manage this project area. But instead of going there, we're going to go to Manage Configurations. When we go to Manage Configurations, we'll be taken to a page where we can view all the configurations that are currently stored within our project. So this will include streams, baselines, and change sets, all of them. This is a nice feature because we can quickly see that we have our initial stream, which we're referring to as our main stream. We also have nested here a second stream for a parallel effort. And it's all very easy to identify in this view. Now let's say we want to see exactly what's in our main stream, perhaps which change set and so on. To do that, we could just select our initial stream, at which point we'll get a new dialog box that will show us all the change sets, streams, baselines that are within our initial stream. We also get this details box, which is really important that we go over today. So far, by default, change sets are not configuration managed in Force. And what I mean by that is if you create a change set, the user will still be able to edit the stream directly. In a true configuration management setting, we don't want people changing the truth data or the configuration managed source without prior approval. So to enforce such a process, we need to look at these two checkboxes that we have in the details section of our advanced configuration. The first is to edit the stream, changes must be made in a change set. This is really important because this will prevent people from editing directly to the stream. Instead, they will now have to use a change set all the time in order to alter the stream in any way. The second option will be to deliver to the stream changes. Change sets must be linked to an approved change request or work item. Now this box is not necessarily needed. Perhaps for most teams it's not needed. But this will actually give you a further configuration managed environment by using Rational Team Concert. So for folks who are familiar with these tools in the past, Rational Team Concert is a change management tool built into Jazz that could support approving or denying changes to specific requirements through using work items. This checkbox will enforce that by saying that you must have a work item that's been approved linked to a specific change set before any changes will be delivered to the stream. So that's a very strict configuration management process that is possible right out of the box with DORSEC generation now. As I said earlier though, for most users, perhaps, all that will be needed is that change sets must be enforced in order to edit the stream, and that all your reviews will take place in the change set setting so that you can approve or reject changes in that forum. Now before we get to the end, I'd like to go over some helpful hints to help everybody through their first interactions with configuration management and DORSEC generation. A first helpful hint is to keep the configuration process as simple as possible. Do not complexify any process that's related to configuration management, as it will just make it confusing for the team. So if you can get by with just using baselines and streams, perhaps that's an easy alternative. If you need to use perhaps a change set, that's also an easy alternative. This process can quickly get complicated when you have multiple streams and multiple change sets, and it can confuse team members, making it hard to get correct inputs from them. So in summary, just try and keep configuration process as simple as possible. Another helpful hint is to check permission in combination with the change set enforcement. This is really important because even if you are using change sets, if you haven't enforced change sets using that last checkbox we went over, users will still be allowed to edit the stream directly depending on their permissions. So this could be a real problem in a configuration managed project because you'll have users editing the stream while a change set is out and people are reviewing it. This will cause conflicts later down the road because requirements could have been changed without using a formal change management process such as the change set. I would also highly suggest that folks draw a diagram configuration management plan and ensure the team understands it. Sometimes these processes and the terms associated with these processes can be confusing, and it can be difficult for the team to understand exactly where they should be working. And lastly, I highly suggest that if you're new to configuration management as a whole, to test this process on the test server. For folks who are not familiar with Jazz or Jazz administration, you can download DoorSex Generation from the Jazz website directly to your laptop, and you'll get free licenses for, I believe it's 30 days now. This is a great opportunity to test various things directly on your laptop without having to have, what folks would refer to as a formal server. Instead, the Jazz server itself will be running on your laptop. What's important to note here is this requires quite a bit of memory allocation on your laptop, but it is a great alternative to having to find a server somewhere to put Jazz on. The other option is that I've seen in the past that IBM has Jazz on their cloud server where you can go and demo Jazz for free as well. This would be a great opportunity to demo the configuration management features of DoorSex Generation without having to necessarily use your project itself. At a very minimum, I would highly suggest that folks use a separate project when testing configuration management, because at the very least you can always archive a project and it won't hamper or hurt your existing project where your real data is. Lastly, let's just go over some further references and helpful links. There's a great article about configuration management linked here by IBM. It's a good walkthrough about the configuration management features of DoorSex Generation. It's similar to what would be covered in this presentation, and it's a great reading material for further knowledge. Another great read, which I really believe everyone who's using DoorSex Generation should look over, are the What's News. The What's New comes out every version of DoorSex Generation, and it explains exactly what's new in that current version release. This is really helpful just to see what's possible now. Not necessarily that you need to use all these additional features, but knowing that they're out there is extremely beneficial. And so, for example, What's New 6.0 has a lot of material of everything that's new, including configuration management, and is a great read. Lastly, there's a quick video, I believe it's about 8 minutes long, about managing requirement changes with DoorSex Generation by Justin Dyer. Highly suggest to take a look at that, as it's really helpful to see just a quick overview of how you might use this process. And with that, I'll open it up to questions, and I hope you enjoyed the presentation.
Thank you, Adam. A lot of questions have rolled in, and I'm going to go ahead and start reading them to you. And for the attendees who are asking questions, as usual, I will reply back to your question as coming up next, so that you're aware that your question is going to be asked and Adam will answer. So first question in the queue is it true that once configuration management is enabled, it is no longer possible to baseline a specific module in Doors Next Generation?
That is a good question. I'm not exactly sure about that question. I know you can still, of course, baseline the project as a whole, but as far as stripping away the ability to baseline a module, I'm not sure. So I'd have to defer that question to perhaps somebody else on the phone from IBM, or table it for another time. That's something we can definitely get back to you on.
Okay, no problem. I know the attendee well, so I'll reach out to him. Next question is, I have the impression that changes can be made to a stream in a stream without necessarily being a part of a change set. Is that accurate? And the question is coming from someone who primarily uses Rational Team Concert.
Okay, so it sounds like somebody is referring to if you have a stream within a stream and making changes directly in that second stream. That would be correct. And let me go up just to make it easier to understand, so we all understand the question. So I believe the person is referring to this example, where you perhaps have a main stream and a second stream underneath it. This stream would be considered within the main stream. For this example, yes, you could be making changes directly in the second stream. You will still have a deliver option into the main stream, at which point the changes made in your second stream will be delivered to the main stream. That is correct.
Okay. Next question, are baselines made to modules and or collections, or can any artifact be baselined?
That's a great question. The baselines that I'm referring to in this brief are made directly to the stream itself. So for example, if we have a main stream, which you can think of covering the entire project, the baseline is actually storing everything within that project. So it's essentially baselining all artifacts, all modules, and all collections, all at once.
Next question, can you merge parts of a branched effort but not all of it?
That's a great question, and you can do that. What it requires is some careful planning and setup. The way that would work, and I didn't cover that because it's actually more advanced than what we covered today, is let's take this slide for example. You can actually have multiple change sets going on at once. This slide will be easier to understand. So let's say instead of having one change set, we have 3 change sets. So just imagine 3 more lines out here representing change sets. What we can do is we have the option to deliver one change set at a time or all 3. And that way what you can do is pick and choose which changes you want to make depending on the change set and deliver them to the stream. So with careful planning, yes, you could have many change sets, perhaps by person or by team, and deliver them one at a time or all at once.
Okay. Next question. Is there a graphical way to see the branches, deliveries, etc., similar to ClearCase?
Not that I know of, unless somebody else has found that feature. What you can do is under Manage Configurations, it does make it quite easy to understand your current configuration because it will indent based on what's nested. So here we have a stream 2 that is a part of the main stream, and you can see it's indented in. If we select our main stream, while it's not graphical, it does do a nice job of listing exactly what change set streams and baselines are a part of it. So in that way, you kind of have an alternative, but I have not seen where there's a graphical representation of your current configuration.
This next question is somewhat lengthy, so if you need me to, Adam, I'll go ahead and repeat it. Here it goes. Can I use an Eclipse plugin to manage the streams from Doors Next Generation? We can define in which stream each user will work. The baseline continuous save all state from Doors Next Generation, all artifacts, or can we choose what artifacts we want on our baseline? Can I deliver a change set for any one stream or just the current stream? For example, I'm working on the second effort stream and I create a change set X. Can I deliver X for mainstream directly where I see the change sets for my team?
Okay, so that sounded like quite a few questions. I'll try and do the best I can without forgetting any. But first, referring to Eclipse, that's a great question. So Eclipse is a client that's traditionally used with Rational Team Concert. Rational Team Concert has this same type of configuration management. Doors Next Generation, as far as I've seen, does not use the Eclipse client. So to the best of my knowledge, you're not going to be using Eclipse with Doors Next Generation or managing configuration management from the Eclipse client itself, whereas you could do that with Rational Team Concert. Let's see, the second question. Delivering a change set to a stream that it has not been a part of. I would have to try that. I believe you can. I believe, I'm trying to think. I'd have to look into that and get back to the person. One way of doing that certainly would be to, well, I'd have to get back to the person on that. Traditionally, a change set is pulled from a stream and is allocated to that stream on purpose. And this is done so because if the stream it came from changes in any way, it flows to that change set. So delivering it to a different stream could be somewhat problematic, but there may be a workaround. So I think that's a question we'll have to table.
Okay. And the attendee who asked the question, you can reply to me and I'll put you in direct contact with Adam. Next question, we're running Doors 6.0.1. We don't have configuration management enabled on Doors Next Generation. What are the impacts, if any, to existing project areas in Doors Next Generation, Rational Team Concert, or Quality Manager that will likely not use change management moving forward, while other new project areas might?
Okay, great question. This article is something that the questioner really needs to read. It covers in great detail what configuration management means to each application. I'll also try and answer that question as brief as possible. The biggest thing and the biggest impact to the team would be that if you enable configuration management in a project in Doors Next Generation, it will no longer be able to link to a project in Rational Team Concert that is not also configuration managed. And this is a big deal because a lot of times Rational Team Concert is linked directly to requirements in Doors Next Generation. To do that linking, you either have to have both projects on configuration managed or both projects with configuration managed turned on. And lastly, not only do you need to use both projects under configuration management, the links also occur through global configuration, which I didn't bring up too much in this talk. Didn't want to muddy the water too much. But global configuration, in summary, is the way to configuration manage multiple applications across JAS. So, for example, what we covered today is configuration management and Doors Next Generation. Global configuration can enforce configuration management across applications. So you could have a stream that is not only in Doors Next Generation, but that stream is also the same stream that's in Rational Team Concert. So in summary, in order to link Rational Team Concert and Doors Next Generation together, they would either need to, neither would be configuration managed, or both would need to be under configuration management, and you would then use global configuration to link these two projects or artifacts and work items together.
Next question, are there details or downsides to having configuration management enabled that may result in users wishing they could disable it and revert to the non-change management Doors Next Generation?
I think there are compromises is the way I would describe it, and this article, again, it's very lengthy and in detail, and it's more than I would be able to cover right now, so definitely check it out. I think the big ones we've talked about already are linking. You know, the big feature in JAS is linking across applications. If you enable configuration management in one project, you're no longer going to be able to link to other projects that aren't configuration managed. So that's a big compromise to a lot of teams. That's one of the major ones. The not undoing it, it's a big deal. So that's why, again, the whole reason you're required to get a key is just so you fully understand exactly what's going on here. If you enable configuration management, it's usually, in most cases, going to lead you to using global configuration as well in JAS. So if you don't have global configuration installed, that's another consideration. You're most likely going to want to have that if you're using configuration management, just because it allows you further flexibility to link across projects that are configuration managed. And for folks who don't know, global configuration is a unique application within JAS. So like Doors Next Generation is an application, global configuration is its own application within the JAS environment. So that would also be a consideration. If you don't have that already, you may necessarily need that in order to go forward.
Next question, will the tool warn you if you go to create a change set by the same name as an already existing one? Can something be turned on to prevent this from happening?
I don't know if I've encountered that one, and I want to be careful not to assume, because my assumption would be you cannot, but I'm not sure. That would have to be tried and tested. I know that you can rename change sets at a later point. I'm just not sure if it will prevent you from creating a change set with the same name at first. We'd have to try that.
Is change management set at a project level or database level?
Great question. Change management is set at a project level, so you can have multiple projects within DOORS Next Generation. Some of them could have configuration management turned on. Some of them could have configuration management turned off. So in that way you could have multiple projects, some with configuration management and some without it. The key itself that we went over today in the slide we're looking at, in order to enable configuration management, you need to enter this key at the application level, and it's under advanced properties in the application level, and that will allow you to enable configuration management in any project within that application.
Next question, could there be conflicts in a resolution mechanism when comparing sources, for example, change sets and streams?
Could you repeat the question? I'm sorry.
Could there be conflicts in a resolution mechanism when comparing sources, for example, change sets and streams?
Yes, there is a conflict resolution. We didn't go over it today. We tried to go over the basics today. Let me find that real quick. You can actually see a piece of it. So here it talks a little bit about it. Let's say you have a change set or multiple change sets, and a change has been proposed to a single requirement, multiple changes to a single requirement. It will actually show those conflicts, and you can resolve them in these steps. If you select automatically deliver changes, it will actually prompt you, and you can choose what to do in every case in the steps. Perhaps you want to keep the source configuration or so on. But in conclusion, yes, the system is smart enough to know when there's multiple changes to a single requirement, and it will walk you through the resolution, and you'll choose which one you'd like to keep.
Next question. I thought that baselines were meant for comparison on slide 6, but slide 20 shows a change set compared to a stream. Baseline isn't a menu option. Does a baseline of a stream need to be selected at that point? Do baselines only compare to other streams and baselines but not change sets?
Great question. No, you can compare to a stream or to a baseline. So if we go back, let's see, try and find it. If I can't find it, I can just talk to it. A change set is typically compared directly to the stream itself, so you could see the changes you're proposing. And then the stream is what you would typically compare to the baseline, because the stream is your current configuration, and the baseline would be a stored configuration at a point in time. So here with compare configuration, this is based on whatever context you're in. So right now, if I'm in a stream and I select compare configuration, I could compare it to a baseline. When I'm in a change set and I select compare configuration, I can then compare it to the stream it's based on, and so on. So hopefully that answers the question. You can compare change sets to streams, and you can absolutely compare streams to baselines. That's typically the way users would be conducting their comparisons.
Once you make the changes, will the actual changes with the strike through and underline will now be visible within your configuration?
I'm trying to think. I believe the question is asking if the strike through and underline will display for the requirement itself. I don't believe. I'm trying to think how to best answer this question. What will display is the history, so you can quickly see the history of that artifact to see what changed and when. The other thing is that if we go down here, this will be retained, this information, and I'm trying to just navigate to where it's retained at. 1 second. If we go into our manage configurations, if we go into our change sets here, we'll see a list of our change sets. there's actually a box where you can select View Delivered Change Sets. And so even though that change set has been delivered, you can still go back at any point in time and view the delivered change set to see exactly what was delivered and what changed. So in that way, the answer is yes, absolutely, and there's two different ways to do it.
Next question, and if I need to repeat this for you, Adam, that's no problem, and that is the following scenario possible? Configuration 1 includes widget _1 _ stream _1 and widget _1 _ stream _2.
I don't I believe it's just asking if you can use underscores, and I believe the answer is yes. You can use underscores in your stream text. I don't see any reason you couldn't do that.
Okay. The attendee who asked the question, if that doesn't answer it, just reply to me and I'll go ahead and put you in contact directly with Adam. Okay, next question. Which version of Doors Next Generation 6.x has the change management tool?
Okay. Great question. I believe it started with 6.0. The current version of Doors Next Generation is 6.02. So if you have the option, that is the recommended version for download. And if you go to Jazz, it will clearly display that. It will be in green and it will say the current version 6.02. The new version that's out right now is 6.03. It's still in, what do they call it? It's past beta. It's at a milestone now. I believe it's either milestone 5 perhaps. So they're getting ready to release that. So that is available for download as well. It's just not the official full version. So to answer your question in short, all 6.x versions can support configuration management. 6.0.2 is the current version of Doors Next Generation that is being released.
Next question. When you are in Manage Configurations, there is a tab for streams when within a specific stream configuration. What is contained within the Streams tab?
Great question. So it's actually the slide we're on right here. You'll see we're in a stream under Manage Configurations, and there's still a Stream tab. And that may be confusing. What that's representing is the fact that you can create a stream from a stream for parallel efforts, perhaps. So if we go up a slide, you'll see that we have two streams represented here. Stream 2 is end-to-end, which represents that Stream 2 has been branched from or is a part of this DNG demo initial stream. So when we go to the next slide, which is selecting the DNG demo initial stream, Stream 2, if we selected the Stream tab, would show up in this, right here in this Stream tab. So it's a way of seeing which streams have been branched from or are a part of the current stream you're viewing.
Okay. Next question. When requiring an approved change request from a stream change, can you link it to ClearQuest?
That's a very good question. I have not seen the option to do so. My understanding is Rational Team Concert is the Jazz solution, the web-enabled solution for ClearQuest. So I would want to assume here that that the answer is no, but perhaps it's possible. I'm just not sure.
All right, next question. Can you provide a sample diagram for a configuration plan? Do you recommend doing this in Visio?
Great question. Really, whatever you're most comfortable with. You know, some teams are quite advanced and they'll do this in a formal architecture tool. Other teams will just use PowerPoint, as you see here. I see no reason that Visio won't work. It's really just so that everyone has a central and good understanding of the configuration management process that's going to take place, and everyone knows where they should be working. You know, this terminology is coming from software development, so it's a little confusing to folks who aren't from the software development world. So that's why I just really believe a diagram makes it so much easier to visualize, okay, where am I as the engineer going to be working in?
Next question. In the helpful hint slide, it is mentioned to download Doors Next Generation and run straight from your laptop. This means that I can run and test Doors Next Generation on my laptop. How do we do that?
Great question. So without getting into too much detail, because we could talk quite at length about this, Doors Next Generation, in order to run, just requires a web server, and it requires Jazz, of course, and the application server. So this is all free to download from IBM, and when you install it, I believe you get 30 days for free. Their trial licenses. If you've never if you've never deployed a server before, it may be a little intimidating, at which point a better option may be to use the free cloud environment that IBM offers on their website. If you want to take it on and give it a try, it's a very simple walkthrough, and what you want to do is deploy the light server, which is Liberty. And Liberty is a web server that's light and will actually run on your laptop, at which point you could then start and stop the server on your laptop, and it will essentially, serve up all the databases as you would using a traditional Jazz environment. It will just be local to your laptop, which is local host, so you can still interact with Jazz just as you would over the web. So it's pretty cool because perhaps you don't have an internet connection, or perhaps you're on a plane traveling and you want to play with Jazz. You could absolutely do this with a laptop because everything's running on it, and it would not require an internet connection. So something to think about, and I think there's a lot of helpful hints and tutorials on this online if you want to check it out on deploying and using the light settings, which again would be Liberty.
Next question. Can project define which attributes are controlled and change such that maybe the owner attribute could be changed in the mainstream and management is turned on?
Great question. To my knowledge, that's not possible yet. I think there's been some talk about that. It would be, I think, the way to describe that would be permissions by context. So perhaps if you're in the change set, you can edit anything. If you're in the stream, you can only edit certain things. I haven't seen that yet. I don't believe it's available. Perhaps it'll be in a version coming down the line. So for now, what would need to happen is you would need to enforce that change sets must be used to deliver to the stream, and in that way, then anyone could edit the change set, but then they cannot edit the stream directly.
What if one requirement proposed change in change set is rejected? You moved or reverted from the change set, or have to be typed back into the original?
That's a great question. From what I've seen, and perhaps in a newer version there is an option for this, but from what I've seen, if you want to reject a very specific change within a change set, you would just open up the artifact and revert back to the previous stored change, and then you would have to close out and go back to your change set approval process. So to answer that question, yes, you would have to go back to the artifact and undo the change.
Next question. Can multiple users work on the same change set?
Yes, they can, and that's a very nice feature. So when the change set's created, any user that's a member of the project and who can view the change sets, of course, will be able to select the change set and work in it. And that is very powerful because you can allow a team to simultaneously work together to propose changes instead of having to create a change set for each individual.
Next question. What do you mean by a stream within a stream? RTC does not have this concept. Please explain how it is different in Doors Next Generation.
Sure. So essentially, the idea is that when developing requirements, sometimes there's different versions of the requirements depending on the product line. So a very simple example is perhaps I'm making a product and I have two consumers. And each consumer wants a uniquely different product, but they all come down to they're the same basic system. So in this case, I need two different requirements documents, but they are interrelated and linked together. So to do this, what you would do is, or we call this as parallel efforts, where you're going to use multiple streams to manage this effort, to manage these multiple documents. And at a later point, they will merge together to produce a single requirements document. And again, this is just one use case. Another use case for this would be when your main stream would be your overall system, and your streams that are branched off from it are the subsystems, are your subsystem requirements for your main system. Or another example would be different releasability information. So perhaps you're releasing something in different increments or versions where you need different configuration management that's unique to the requirements, but they are all branching from the same main requirements as a whole. So hopefully that helps clarify. Again, if it's confusing and if your team doesn't need it, there's no reason you have to use multiple streams. It's just an option to allow teams who do need it that flexibility.
Next question. As in rational team concert, do streams have flow targets that you can set to another stream to flow you change sets to?
I'm not familiar with that in door section generation. I don't want to say it's not possible. You know, there may be an option to do that somewhere, but I haven't seen that.
Do you add the GCM, the acronym, to single project areas only, or can it be added to a lifecycle project once for all associated projects?
So I believe the acronym was GCM, which
yes.
to me signifies Global Configuration Management. So Global Configuration Management covers all applications. So typically that would be done at the project level. So for example, if you create a stream in Global Configuration, you can then use that stream in a particular project within door section generation. That is typically the way you would use Global Configuration Management within door section generation, is at the actual project level. You could be working in a globally controlled stream, but that's done at the project level.
Can you use RecIf export and import to move away from doors next generation project area with the acronym of CFM? I'm not sure what that means. It's uppercase C, lowercase f, uppercase M, enabled to meet one that hasn't. I think that's configuration management.
Okay, so I think if I'm understanding the question correctly, it would be, let's say you've enabled configuration management, you no longer want configuration management. Could you use a RecIf, which is a migration technique, to get your requirements out of the configuration managed project and into a non-configuration managed project? The answer is yes, but with limitations. And the limitations would be RecIf is great for transferring text and data and pictures and so on, but it's not going to transfer your history, and it's not going to necessarily transfer, or you're going to have to be careful how you transfer your links and so on. So to say it's a one-button solution, it is by no means. But if you found yourself in trouble and you really needed to just get out into an unconfiguration managed project, you could at least migrate most of your text data, requirements, and so on that way. But you would definitely expect to lose certain metadata, such as history.
Which leads me to the next question, which is similar to the one you're just answering, and that is, when and why should configuration management be disabled? You want to expand on that, or do you think you pretty much answered it?
I think that's a real quick one. It can't be disabled, which is the quick question, or the quick answer would be configuration management can't be disabled, which is why there's so much reading to be done and there's so much documentation on the reasons to enable it and the compromises.
Why is there no concept of flow target for streams instead of nested streams in Doors Next Generation? Can the stream hierarchy be changed after it is created in Doors Next Generation?
Good questions. I'm not sure about the flow target. I haven't seen that terminology in Doors Next Generation. The stream hierarchy, can it be changed? I have not seen where you can change the stream hierarchy after the fact. What you can do is you can do some trickery where if you need to change the hierarchy, you could create a stream where you want it to be, and then you could deliver whatever stream you'd like to move to that stream. That could perhaps be an option. I'm sure there's a way to do it, and others have encountered it. So perhaps it might be a table question, or perhaps there's some resources online. You can also archive streams. So let's say I no longer want to stream to there. Like most things in Jazz, I can archive it to remove it, at which point I could always unarchive it. So that gives you some flexibility to change the hierarchy some as well.
Can global configuration management be turned on for existing lifecycle projects?
My answer to that would be yes. Global configuration is its own application. So if the application is running on Jazz, and you're then free to create streams and baselines within global configuration, and at which point you can then consume these or use these from different projects within Jazz that are in different applications. So whether it be a lifecycle or a lifecycle project or a just a traditional project, it should not make a difference.
Those are all the questions. Attendees, the panel's open. Feel free to ask one, and I can read it immediately to Adam. Does RTC support change management for work items?
Yes. Configuration management is a part of Rational Team Concert 2. Again, you'll need to follow the steps to enable configuration management and so on. And you might want to double check that, but from my understanding, I do believe that configuration management is a part of Rational Team Concert now as well.
What is the purpose of Project Archive in Doors Next Generation? How is it different from Project Archive in Doors 9?
Great question. I think that's coming from what we were just talking about Archive. So in Archive in Doors 9, which is referring to traditional doors or legacy doors, you could actually save, and it would be a file, and you could then upload that file to different servers and so on, and it was a piece of movable data that could be moved around. In Archive here, what this really is it's essentially a soft delete is what it's more like, where you want to delete something, but this is, again, an industrial database where deleting anything permanently is bad. So you archive it instead, where it will disappear and you will no longer see it, but you then have the option to undo the delete. So really, in this case, the archive button is more of a soft delete, whereas in traditional doors, or Doors 9, archiving would be a way to store your data in a file that was then movable and re-uploadable.
So the database now is not object-oriented, and it is a relational database, correct?
I don't think I can answer that. That is a very complex question, and I think it really comes down to the underlying structure of the database, and I think this product's very unique in its underlying structure, so I don't think I'm educated enough to answer that one. But I think there's differing opinions, and it's almost a mix.
No problem. Okay, so that's it with Q&A. We're going to go ahead and wrap up. Adam, do you have any final things you'd like to say before we conclude?
No, I'd just like to thank everybody for dialing in and listening, and I hope you enjoyed it.
And for the attendees still on, if you want the presentation, it's in the handout section of the control panel there. Just click on that plus sign and you can download it immediately before I end the session here. And then look for my automated email where you can view the recording. And if you have any questions, feel free to reply to me directly. I'll be happy to put you in contact with Adam or any other IBM personnel of relevance. So we appreciate your attendance as usual. Everyone have a great, I guess Labor Day weekend's coming up. Everyone have a great 3-day holiday. Adam, thank you so much for your participation and presentation. Excellent job. We really appreciate that. So with that said, the webinar is now ended. Take care all, and goodbye.